I wanted to go ahead and ask Father Anthony to start us off with an opening prayer. And then I will go over some house rules, and then we're going to kick it over to the truly licensed person on this panel to deal with all of us, Catherine. So, Father, could you go ahead and open us in prayer, and then I'll do a formal introduction and house rules for everybody.
And this is just to say that this prayer came from a member of the FDLC, and we have been invited to share it with as many persons as possible. So we begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. May we who are merely inconvenienced remember those whose lives are at stake. May we who have no risk factors remember those most vulnerable. May we who have the luxury of working from home remember those who must choose between preserving their health or making their rent. May we who have the flexibility to care for our children when their schools close remember those who have no options. May we who have to cancel our trips remember those that have no place to go. May we who are losing our margin money in the tumult of the economic market remember those who have no margin at all. May we who settle in for a quarantine at home remember those who have no home. During this time when we cannot physically wrap our arms around each other, may God help us to find ways to be loving and give the embrace of God to our neighbors. Amen.
Amen.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Thank you, Father Anthony. I wanted to just go over some house rules before we really get started, and I'm pretty sure when I forget something, Kimmy will jump in and add it. We are using video conferencing software. Due to the large number of participants, we're actually running this as a webinar so that your videos will not be on. You will just see ours as the panelists who are speaking. We can, however, hear you when we unmute you for the question and answer portion. A few tips on using the microphone. We'll keep you muted and then unmute you as we're able to get to people's questions in the Q&A, which brings me to a couple features that I want to highlight and have your attention at. You can raise your hand. I think somebody's already doing that, so we'll get to you in a second, David. But there's a raise your hand function on the lower right when you're in the participants. So if you open up the participants window, it gives you the option to raise your hand. And so you can use that when you want to make a comment or be recognized to speak, which is how we ask everybody to be acknowledged and then speak. You can also use the chat to make comments, or if you want to, questions. But because this is a webinar, it does have a Q&A feature. So just like there's a chat button and a participants button along the bottom of that little Zoom panel, there is also a Q&A button. And so in the Q&A, you can post questions, and then we will be able to see which ones are still open, which ones we've answered, and which ones we won't be able to get to. I will be running, myself and Kimmy will be kind of facilitating the questions and running those panels, the chat, the Q&A. Kimmy's even over on Facebook Live running any questions that might come from there. I will, like I say, recognize you when you raise your hand, so you can actually speak after I've read your questions. For the sake of time, I'm going to read the questions, but then if you want to speak during your particular question that you asked, I will recognize you after you raise your hand and we'll unmute you. Please be mindful and use appropriate, I'm sure I don't have to say this, but you know the day you say it is the day you have to, right, Catherine?
Absolutely.
So please be mindful and appropriate in language and just general decorum and civility, which again, I don't think we'll have a problem, but I like to say it just in case. especially for you, Father Anthony.
Okay.
Also, we ask that you're mindful of time and that you realize that we have, at this point, over almost 70 people on here. We'll probably have a bunch more. So we'd like to get to as many questions as possible. So if you do have a comment or a question, to try to be brief and kind of to the point. And then just a couple other little housekeeping things. You may want a journal, a pen, some water. I have mine because I know my throat's going to get dry from talking tonight. So
Mine too.
yeah, water, tea, whatever helps you be able to concentrate and to be present. And then there's a final set of house rules, which I'm kind of going to turn over to the therapist of the three of us. And it's very, very important. So you got to listen to what she says. Catherine?
Hey, thank you, Isabel. So a couple of things that we need to definitely go over tonight. This is not a therapy session. This is a place for you to be able to ask questions and get some of your questions answered tonight. I'm hoping we'll get to a lot of questions, but we may not get to everyone's. So be mindful that there will be resources at the end, and Isabel maybe can speak more to that as soon as I'm done. But there'll be resources and ways to get in touch with myself and with other members of the team from Catholic Charities. Should you have any questions after this that we can't get to, my email will be available too, so that you have that. This is not HIPAA compliant or HIPAA conforming. So understand that it's not a therapy session and that this is not essentially private because it is a public forum. There are a lot of people in the room. So be mindful in your sharing. Don't necessarily overshare more details than you feel comfortable with. And we have a tendency to do that when we are feeling stressed and overwhelmed. So I just ask you to practice some good self-care. And we're going to talk about that a lot more tonight. But practice some good self-care and some good containment, and be thoughtful about the questions that you're bringing up, and make sure that it feels appropriate to you to be able to share this in a large group forum. A couple of other things just to note, that what we talk about here tonight, I'm not going to have a single right answer for everyone. So this is a teaching moment, it's a learning moment. So like Isabel suggested, if you want to have a pen and paper to take some notes, it's always a good idea. You will probably learn something new tonight, and you'll also probably feel a connectedness with other people that are in the room with us tonight asking questions. So if you're feeling like something's not getting answered, please raise your hand and Isabel will call on you, and we'll try and get your question answered. But if we don't, we can certainly hopefully take care of it and connect with you after we're done. I think that, where's the word I'm looking for? I have no special interest or investment tonight in, I'm not getting remuneration or anything like that from this, and that's something that we're supposed to say. And I think that's about it to get me started. I think those are the little bits that we need to go over first thing.
Out of the priest, the therapist, and the theologian, only one of us has to worry about that disclaimer. That would be you, Catherine. Just to follow up on a couple things and answer a couple questions I see in the Q&A. We are recording this to make it available afterwards, so anybody can go on San Pedro's website and access it later. I don't know about the captions. I don't know if Kimmy might know something about that, if we can put captions on them. I don't know if you can do that on your own panel, which you might be able to, and I'm sorry, I don't know the settings. But I do not know how we could do that. So we'll have to get back to you on that one. Kimmy, you do know the answer. Of course you do.
Yes, unfortunately, it's not enabled right now for this meeting. I apologize for that. I'll look into it for next week, though.
And thank you, everybody. Thanks for those good questions. So I'm going to formally introduce our panel here. I am Isabel Fernandez. I am the Director of Mission Effectiveness for the Diocese of Orlando. I work for both the Office of Schools and the diocese at large, especially through San Pedro. And I'm basically a theologian, so I answer Jesus questions, make sure that the schools are doing good Jesus things, and basically try to keep our mind on our Catholic identity and our faith in the forefront. Father Anthony Aarons is with us this evening, and he is the Director of Spiritual Development, serving at San Pedro and Catholic Charities. He's a very busy man. I'm not even sure there's only one of him. He was also honored by Pope Francis and designated as a missionary of mercy. So should I get mean with my theological dogmatics, you know where to go to with your question for a little mercy. And finally, last but not least, is Catherine Galda, who is a licensed clinical social worker, right? That's what all those letters mean?
And
Okay.
that, yep, that's correct.
Thank God I got it right. Okay. And Director of Behavioral Health for Catholic Charities. Catherine has a lot of experience in trauma and in community health. She actually worked in Connecticut during the Sandy Hook events that happened. So she has a lot of experience dealing with communities and crisis. So what I'm going to do right now is kind of turn it over to Catherine because she wants to start us off. And I've got a couple questions, Catherine, once you're done with your intro and your setup, and then we will get going. Thank you all very much.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Isabel. And I'm so glad you're here, Father Anthony. You calm my soul.
Always good working with you.
So for tonight, we're focusing on stress and this pandemic. Let's face it, we all have it. That's probably our best starting point tonight. You know, when we think about the events of the world and all of the multi-layered things that are going on outside in the world at large, in different parts of the state and different parts of the world, and then we bring it in closer and closer and closer back to our own kind of nuclear family and friends setup, we're all impacted, each person in a different way. And that's what we're going to explore tonight. We're going to take some time and really look at where we're at. We always have to start where we are. And what I'd like us to do in the beginning, after I get through the outline, is we're going to do a little bit of an exercise together. I hope you don't mind indulging me in a little bit of progressive relaxation, because one of the things that happens when we are stressed and overwhelmed, people in my field are kind of calling this a cumulative traumatic event, because it's impacting people all over the world and all of us in different ways. So when we talk about a large-scale traumatic event, often we walk around and we're super activated, and we'll talk about a little bit more about that too. So what I'd like us to do is just indulge in a little grounding and breathing and coming back to our center, so that we can start off from a place of true presence, both in our body and also in our minds. We're going to talk about strength. We're going to talk about what we already have. We as Floridians certainly have a lot of our tools already in our belt that we can access, that we can look at and utilize and kind of pull out from different experiences that we've had, dust them off and put them into play here to help us not only help ourselves, but also our families, our kids, people in our community, and the people that kind of branch out into the larger, more global community. And the last piece we're going to talk about tonight is learning. There are experiences that we're going to have that, even though we didn't want to have them, we don't want this pandemic to be here, and the strife and the loss and the pain that we're all going through. It is an opportunity. And it's an opportunity that we can, if we are present with ourselves and if we're present with our faith, we can grow in different ways from. So I want us to spend some time being able to talk a little bit about that. There'll be plenty of time to answer your questions. I am open to answering everything that I possibly can, but by no means am I the expert on everything. I have worked in trauma for my entire career, but I don't know it all. There are a lot of people out there who have a wealth of knowledge. So I'm hoping to impart to you from my own educational experience and my practice wisdom and my presence and my own life experience. And hopefully that will give you something that you can take away and work from to kind of further yourself in the process and be able to manage where you are as we go through this collective experience together.
Thank you, Catherine. The outline is really helpful. And actually, the first question from the chat is really appropriate to where you wanted us to begin, which is where we are and kind of feeling where we are right now with this whole situation, with this whole crisis. One of our participants asked, is it quote unquote normal to feel like you're having symptoms of the illness itself? So I think it'd be good to go over what are some normal responses to this kind of crisis.
Absolutely. I think that's great. Can I ask us to indulge in a little exercise first?
Oh, yes.
Would
Please.
that be okay?
Mm.
All right. So before we begin and really get into the meat of that first question, and I appreciate it because I think it's really important to retune into our bodies, and you bring up a great connector, that our minds and our hearts and our bodies and our spirit are all connected. And so we feel impact in different ways. So if you wouldn't mind indulging me and just take a couple minutes here, wherever you are, in whatever space you're in. I hope that everybody's in a comfortable spot right now, maybe in a quiet spot where there's not a lot of extra noise going on, or televisions or dogs barking. I hope you found that space for yourself. And if you haven't, take a moment and find that space. If it's possible, I think you'll get more out of the experience of the evening, but also I think that you'll get more out of the experience of this exercise. So what we're going to do is a very abbreviated version of a progressive muscle relaxation. So what I'd like to have people do, if you would indulge me, is just simply get yourself into a nice comfortable position. The best way to experience this would be to close your eyes so that you can really tune into what is happening inside of your body. And I'd like you to take a big, deep breath in and just hold it for a moment. And now let it out. And as you let it out, feel the muscles in your belly begin to release, and everything kind of sink down a little bit deeper into your chair. And I want you to do that one more time. In, hold it, and then release it. Okay, starting with your toes. I want you to scrunch up your toes. Scrunch them as hard as you can and just hold it for a minute. And now release. And feel your feet relax. Wiggle your toes. Feel them in your shoes, or feel the carpet underneath your feet. And now take a big deep breath in and out. We're going to start working our way up our bodies. Tighten up those calf muscles. Give them a squeeze. Hold it for a second. And now release. Good. And a big deep breath in and out. And as we move up our bodies, we're going to always start and stop with a clean breath in and a clean breath out. And as you breathe out, feel those muscles relax even more. So now tighten up your thighs and your pelvic area. Just squeeze as hard as you can. Get those that muscle contraction going. Hold it for a moment. And now release it. Feel everything kind of sinking down. Big deep breath in and a breath out. Now, contract your stomach. If you're sitting down, just try and pull it in. Pull your belly button back towards your spine. Feel your chest rise up. And now release and have it come down. Good, we're almost there. Big deep breath in and a breath out. And now your shoulders and your neck, squeeze it tight. Scrunch it up. There you go. Hold it for a second. And now feel it relax and let your shoulders drop down toward the floor. Big deep breath in and a big deep breath out. And the last one, just tighten your neck and your shoulders and try and tighten your facial muscles. And release with a big deep breath out. One last breath. Big deep breath in. And a nice deep breath out. So right now, if it worked for you, then you should be feeling a little bit more grounded and a little bit more centered. You're going to feel your body in the room, and maybe you're even going to feel your brain working a little bit more effectively. Because when we are stressed out, one of the first things that can happen is we get confused. we get a little bit kerfuffled. Our thoughts are not clear. It's sometimes difficult to make decisions, or difficult to remember. You walk into a room, you remembered what you were trying to get, and then you get there and then you forget. And that's okay. That's all part of what's typical and normal. So to go back to the question that Isabel read, is it normal to be feeling like you're having symptoms? Did I capture that?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. Yes, it's often super typical that when we are introduced to different information around, especially around a health-related issue, that we can become kind of hyper aware of our own body. And by hyper aware, I mean really tuned in. So sniffles and sore throats and a little bit of coughing can be really worrisome and troublesome, and actually get our anxiety flowing. Because remember, anxiety really speaks to a fear of either something about, worry about the past or worry about the future. So in this case, it would be a forward focused worry where we're concerned that we might be contracting the virus. It's very typical to have that experience. And while I can't speak to exactly what you're going through for the person who asked the question, and to whether or not the symptoms that you're having should be, something that you're paying more attention to and seeking medical help for, this is also a time when people have a lot of allergies in Florida. So it's not atypical for people to experience sniffles and sneezes and coughs and have this kind of hyper vigilant or hyper aware sense of concern about their own health. And if you continue to be concerned, you should find a testing facility and get yourself tested, or call your local physician. Doctors still have online visits, virtual visits, just like we do in therapy right now. So there are access points for you.
I think that was a really good place to start. One of the things that I know that we did as part of inviting folks to be part of this session was we sent out the invitation for this out to our school community, our Catholic schools here in the diocese. And we actually have a question from Jane. I'm going to read your question, Jane, and if you want to make a further comment, please feel free to raise your hand and I'll recognize you. As a teacher of 37 4th and 5th graders, are we paying you enough, Jane? That seems like a job right now. What are some things that we can say to our students to help them feel safe and unafraid?
That's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no one right answer here. When it comes to young people and talking about difficult things, whether it is talking about a traumatic life event, or a mass shooting, or the pandemic, the best suggestion that I can give you is age-appropriate truths. It's very difficult to gauge, especially as a teacher, what families are telling their young people about what's happening. But I think the best suggestion that I can make is helping them to understand when they do have questions, if they bring up issues related to why we're still in kind of a segregated setting, why they can't come back to school. That's a question. I have a freshman and I have a 6th grader, and we just found out right in the last 24 hours that school will be virtual for the rest of the year. And there's a lot of feelings there to process. Some kids are excited about that. But I know in my own family, my daughter's experiencing some grief related to that. She's experiencing some sadness at not being able to see her friends. So a couple of great suggestions to offer is listen to your students. If they are wanting to share with you about what's going on for them and how they're feeling, just try and hear them in a non-judgmental way, and try not to interrupt until they get all the way to the end, because they may have to kind of go around the block to get to the central point of what it is that they're concerned about. And then meet that concern with what you would consider, and this better than me being a teacher, age-appropriate information for them. So using language that is not above them, but talking with them about what and admitting when you don't have an answer to something. And certainly if they continue to express a lot of concern for you, you know how to go through the proper channels at your school to be able to connect with mom and dad and help to share that information with them so that that young person isn't suffering alone.
Father Anthony, I think you might also have some spiritual guidance around this question about how to offer some support and guidance to kids, especially, I think she mentioned 4th and 5th graders, so fairly young elementary age children, around how to help them even use their faith or learn to use their faith in situations like this.
You know, having had some experience in the school system, you know, one of the things that I remember that I used to say to the teachers, I'd always say to them, never answer a question that is not being asked. Because sometimes, you know, out of our own insecurity, we start answering something else because that's what we're more comfortable with. So I like what Catherine said, listen to them, let them go all the way to Miami and back with, you know, but just
you just described every conversation I've ever been a part of, Father Anthony.
Oh, you know, you see, and really listen, you know, and of course, there's one thing that we find young people always asking to with this is that, you know, where is God? Because if God really loves me, you know, where is He in all of this? And so it's not just the child, but with everybody. Faith, hope, and love, those 3 key things, you know, those great theological virtues, they are the things that we start to question. And so answer the child's question about faith, you know, in as much as we can, not so much by the words, but I think it's by the example that we set, that when we lose our own stress, when we believe that God is with us and that God has not abandoned us, you know, then we can help them. You know, yesterday we celebrated Divine Mercy. And when we pray the Chaplet of Mercy, we pray that in difficult times that we may not despair nor become despondent. You know, so it's out of our lack of despair and our lack of despondency that we are able to share with others by our presence.
I think that those are the kind of tried and true ways. And so when we're dealing with anybody's questions, I mean, the most important thing is to actually just be present and hear it and then answer it. And then to really just basically share what it is that you're doing. Sometimes I find that students are looking for wisdom. They want to, maybe they just need that reassurance from another adult in their lives that they have a relationship with about those things. And those of you who are teachers and who are working in schools, you are often a real stable presence in kids' lives, where mom and dad might be basically they might be very stressed out and a child doesn't even want to really ask mom or dad about that right now. So you guys have a wonderful opportunity to really respond. And I think that the most important thing that was said by both Catherine and Father here is to just listen and to hear them out and let them kind of tell you what's going on. I've got 2 different questions that are in queue, and I want to put both of them in. I'm going to read this question from anonymous attendee, and it's another one of these tough questions that we're not going to have a cookie cutter answer for, but that is an important one to look at. This comes to, and this is for both of you and myself, I guess I'm involved with this too. How do you help high school seniors have closure? For a year that truly is difficult to have closure, since they will miss out on all these last year rites of, basically it's a question about what do you do about rites of passage that are being missed, and how do you help them get closure? Obviously we can't answer the question like how do you with one answer that will kind of serve everybody, but what are some things or some strategies Catherine and Father Anthony, that we can use to try to help our seniors kind of walk through this?
Father Anthony, do you want to start or should I?
You go ahead, Catherine. You start.
Passing the buck. I know.
Therapist
No.
first, priest second, theologian last.
There you go. Again, there isn't a cookie cutter answer, but I think that the webinar or the virtual meeting that's coming next on recognizing grief is going to speak a lot to that very point. There are high school seniors all around the country who are not going to be able to have those rites of passage, who are not going to be able to have prom and not going to be able to have the graduation ceremony that they thought they would have. I know that school systems are making provision, but it's not going to be the same. And how we find closure with anything when things don't go our way, when life kind of comes up and we think we're on one path and then dramatically we're shifted into a different direction, is really quite a bit about finding new rites, new rituals, new ceremony, new ways of honoring the experience, not only the traditional experience that they're missing, but the experience that they will have. We've had to adapt in some pretty dramatic ways, some of us much more than others. So looking at ways that seniors can get some closure by being able to have a virtual grad party or a virtual ceremony, trying to use what's available to us to create something that is akin to the rites of passage that they are missing, but yet unique and different, where we can honor or allow them to honor what they're losing, but also recognize all that they've gained, because for each one of them, they're graduating. Many of them are going on to college or into the military or going on to next things when those things begin. And so life still goes on. It looks different. It's not what we anticipated or expected, and it's certainly not necessarily what we wanted. But that doesn't mean that it's a joyless experience or an experience that has to be marred by everything being doom and gloom. It's about helping a young person to create some perspective.
One of the things that strikes me, Father Anthony, and as you were talking, Catherine, just came to mind, and Father Anthony, as a priest who celebrates Mass and the sacrament, you'll know this well. But in the rituals of the Church, in the actual text that the celebrants read, there'll be a option A to how to do whatever rite it is, anything from confirmation to communion to just regular Mass to a blessing, a prayer, baptism, doesn't matter. But there's an A, there's a B, and I don't know about you, Father Anthony, but I've seen some that go B, C, D, G, F. I don't know what situations they had to come up with, but they have different options. And the idea and the way you're taught to use the liturgy of the Church and the Church's practice is you prefer to do it this way, right? There's A, and A is always what you prefer, and that's the ideal. But we recognize that there are sometimes, for lots of reasons, this year everybody's in the same boat as far as missing these things, but every year we have kids and families who, for some reason or another, something happens, there's a death in the family, there's an emergency, something happens, and they miss these kind of celebrations and marking points in their lives. We're all in it together, but I think that there's a certain wisdom in the Church's way of understanding there's a best way to do this, but that doesn't mean it's the only way. And you want to go back to the best way whenever you can, get that version back. But we recognize that there's multiple ways to celebrate. Am I reading that right, Father Anthony? Is that the way the liturgy works?
Yes, definitely. Because, I have been, in my past life, well, not so long ago, I was chaplain of a high school in this diocese. And I kept saying to myself, when this thing came about, I said, oh, what would I be doing if I were at the school to help these seniors, knowing that there are so many rituals that are there. And so I agree with you that we need to be creative. And because it is in our creativity that we offer hope. Because if we're not creative, then we're dead. And when we say, okay, here is something that has come to us, it wasn't something that we planned for. Let us see how we can best, celebrate this. And of course, some of the things, it means that they will be delayed. So I think that we can say to our students, okay, you may be going off to college without having had the graduation that you wanted or that was the accustomed thing. But maybe when you come home for the Christmas break, we can do something, so let us delay rather than deny.
Well, and I think that as far just from my position working with the schools, I think all the schools I know actually are working on ways to deal with the actual what to do. But I like what what you said about creativity bringing hope and knowing that there's going to be a way that we figure this out for each other. For the kids, for the parents, for everybody. Nothing will be perfect, but nothing ever is. People are often unhappy with whatever kind of celebrations we have. So this is just an opportunity to kind of work together to come up with something, and we will. I have a couple more questions that I wanted to also get to. And again, I want to speak to the anxiety and stress that these kind of situations generate. One of the things that I'm noticing in working with our families, our teachers, with all the different communities that we touch through San Pedro, through the Office of Schools, through Catholic Charities, is that everybody in the family kind of has their own piece of the stress pie. And it's like the parents have this stuff that they're worried about. The kids have this little piece that they're worried about. The teachers, the administrators, but what we forget is that we are all in multiple roles. I am teacher, I am parent, I am therapist, I'm not priest, but we are all different. We're playing multiple roles. And then how do you deal with the stresses of all those things kind of falling on each other? And I'm noticing that in some of these questions. So our next question is, we have somebody who said, Danny Morrow. And if you want to say anything, you can always raise your hand and add in after I read your question. As a PE teacher, coach / athletic director, he almost has as many jobs as you do, Father Anthony. How do you plan for a future that is in question for students to participate in sports and activities? I think that speaks to a lot of people's anxieties. I have a son with a birthday coming up. Not sure what we're going to do about that. He's got to figure out what he's going to do with all his athletic teams and how he's going to even talk to them about that. But what I'm hearing in that question is also, how does he deal with that stress of that? You know what I mean? And Catherine, I think that might be a good place for you to kind of help guide us through. We're carrying stress, trying to figure this stuff out for others.
Right. We're all, I think you make a great point, Isabel, and the question is pertinent. We all carry multiple roles and multiple layers of different types of stress as each new situation comes up, and we're confronted with having to kind of build the plane as we're flying, as we're fond of saying at different times in Catholic Charities. Sometimes we have to find the solution to a problem or an issue when we're already in it. And dealing with that uncertainty and dealing with the not knowing brings us a lot of discomfort, not only inside of our bodies, but inside of our hearts, making it difficult for us to function, and making it difficult to know what to say, how to say, when to say. And the fact of the matter is that that we don't necessarily have the answer to that. We don't necessarily have a great answer to that athletic, that kid in sports who is being denied or deprived for this year of being on their teams and being able to perform at things that they love and things that they excel at. I think for us, it's important to remember that we have to think about the things that we do have control over. We have to kind of go back and re-identify for a minute what is in the wheelhouse. What are the tools that we still have at our disposal? What are the things that are still working? Because when we're faced with a bunch of uncertainty and a lot of unknowns and questions that we can't necessarily answer, how do we build out the future if we don't start where we are?
Yeah, I think that's one of the hard things to to grab a hold of is we're thinking about all the stuff that's coming because we're very uncertain. And I
Yeah.
think you and I had talked about, we have some skill sets around this stuff. We've been through, we know hurricanes. We know, we are Floridians and we know how to do this.
Right.
But then not this is different. So there's a couple questions after this one that kind of speak to that a little bit, but I think that even this, and we have another question, is like any key points to help parents cope with this. The parent, the coach, we have some things we can rely on, right, in our wheelhouse. How do we assess that? How do we like get in touch with that, Catherine, like without like going back into remembering how when our screen got blown out by Irma or whatever? Like, how do we get back in touch with those things?
I think that's a great question and a good jumping off point. One of the things that we feel when we are faced with a whether it's a pandemic or a hurricane or some other kind of large traumatic event, everything gets effectively kind of blown up, right? Our structure, the way we live our lives, certainly we're living that every single day, right? Everyone's life has been radically changed. And we, for the moment, can't get back to the way we used to be. And it has to be okay, right? We don't have to like it, but it kind of has to be okay for right now because we have no other choice. So in that state that we're in, as much as we dislike it, the most effective thing that we can do is first kind of go back and as adults, even as young people, kind of take your own inventory. What worked for you in the past? You come to tonight with a wealth of experience throughout your life, with things that have gone wrong, things that have gone your way, traumatic events that you have lived through. I mean, the fact of the matter is we've all had traumatic events occur. We don't like to talk about it very often. We don't use that language with it necessarily, but we've all had hard times. We have all struggled. We've all, had to kind of sometimes dig our way out of experiences and really, it's been difficult. And because of that, and because of the experience of going through things that are hard, when the only way out of the situation is through the situation, we can't stop, we can't go back, we can only go forward. Thinking about and kind of remembering, not necessarily when the TV got blown up or when the front window got blown out from the hurricane, but remembering what you did in those moments, what you did during those times. That's what we talk about when we talk about going back. It's a kind of a concept out of psychology that really it's all strengths based. It looks at and asks a person, and so I would be asking you, a person with the question, to identify what worked in your past before. Some things that were helpful, and you can start there. Generally speaking, though, when we're faced with times that are very stressful and overwhelming, the best things that we can do for ourselves is help ourselves to kind of create a structure around even if it's a structure around your day. You can start right there. Getting up, when we look at the information coming out of the CDC or, the Veterans Administration, and I'm looking at all sorts of data that comes out of these very learned places with people who are a whole lot smarter than me, who are saying, okay, what should we be doing now? A return to a basic structure creates a sense of safety. Because when we're experiencing a traumatic event, we are experiencing uncertainty. We're experiencing a disruption in trust. We're experiencing a disruption in our safety, and we need to regain that. Even if we can't answer the larger questions of the world right now and what's going on, we can get up every day, shower every day, put on clean clothes. We can eat 3 squares and take care of our body. Taking care of your body decreases your stress. Why? Because when we do that, we are grounding ourselves, we're giving ourselves fuel, and we're taking care of the vessel. Lots of food, an appropriate amount of food. Step back. An appropriate amount of food, lots of water, lots of.
Where you said an appropriate amount of food there, Catherine.
Movement. Movement is super important. To whatever extent you can, move your body. Swimming, walking, whatever you can, it burns that anxious energy. Won't make you less worried, but it will calm your body. That's really important.
I wanted to add in a couple questions to
Sure.
part of that would also be part of this, just because I want to make sure people's specific things get answered within what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so one was the coach about what do you deal with this concern about how you're going to deal with your teams. Another one is helping parents. And I think one of the things that as you're talking, I realized is we think about how to help our kids, right, as parents, but you also need a structure.
Yep.
Right? Like you also need to be minding the store as far as what you're going through. You need to be feeding your mind and your body and your soul with the things it needs. I have another, we're actually running on Facebook Live right now. I've got about 20 people over there, and Kimmy's sending me one of the questions, which again, along these lines. I'm a burned out psychologist. Any tips? She says she's trying, or he, I really don't know. It just says a question from Facebook. I'm trying to spend a lot of time in adoration and tune into Mass on San Pedro's website. So, it sounds like what you're saying, Catherine, around creating like what works for you and doing that. That sounds like this person is doing the right kinds of things. But I've got a few different folks asking about that. What do I do to cope with all this stress? And so we're saying use what skills you have, right?
Yep.
Maintain a healthy schedule and create some kind of structure, however that would be beneficial for you, your family, your household, however that would work. And then also to that doing that and also getting some activity will help clear some of that stress. I think at one point you and I had talked also about using what you have and what you know, what's worked for you in the past, but then also this is an opportunity for new. And for, I think a lot of people, and for all of us, this is new because it goes on. It's like the hurricane that never goes away.
Right.
And we've even had to reconstitute church. I have been rather blown away by how much our church has had to adapt. An institution that does not like change, that takes 1,000 years to make significant decisions about how to change something. And here we've had to flip everything around. I know that for all the priests, I know that's been a huge challenge, Father Anthony. We've been trying to provide people access through what we've been doing at San Pedro, some of the things you've been doing. But people are asking us, how do I prevent another question we have, how to prevent an anxiety attack? How do I cope with this to help my kids? And it sounds like it might be a good opportunity to talk about the new things, given that our church is our whole society's in the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just go to church like you used to. What are the new things that we're learning? What are the new kinds of strategies that we might be able to create given the situation?
Today I was talking with Isabel, and I said, there are two important things that we need to do. Two P's. We need to pray and we need to play. Pray and play. And actually, that came to me, and I'm not really advertising now, but San Pedro has as its signature, reconnect with what really matters. And so we believe that that is what San Pedro exists for, to help persons to reconnect with what really matters. And so when we think, and what really matters, it's God, others, and self. Those are the three important, well, if I say things, don't think that I'm calling you or God a thing, but, the three important elements in our lives. And so when I think of it, is that, so we're going to pray. We're going to reconnect with God. And when we reconnect, it means that we are going to be honest with God and tell God exactly how we feel. You know, because as my grandmother used to say, God is a big boy and he can handle anything. You know, so
I don't know if that's theologically vetted, but okay, Father.
you know, you see, so and the other thing is that as we take care of ourselves, you know, we have to take care of the physical. One of the heartening things, you know, in the morning, because people are not going to work, I see all of these people who are out there walking or running, you know, or cycling, you know, they're doing something to clear their heads. And so, yes, we relax, we pray, and we play. But, you know.
I've got a couple other specific questions, folks, that I wanted to pitch at you. And they're all similar because I think the answers will be the same. What can you do to prevent an anxiety attack? Which I think, Catherine, is a very specific question that you can answer. And then I've got a couple other ones, but maybe that one should be first. What can you do to prevent an anxiety attack? What kind of strategies can someone use?
Sure. I think that's a really good question, because I think anxiety is something that we're all walking around with, and having an anxiety or a panic attack is something that's happening a little bit, you know, more frequently now, given all the general stress that we're walking around under. Specifically for that individual that asked that question, again, I'm starting to sound a little like a broken record about tuning back into yourself. The easiest way, well, and I won't say, maybe I should take back, easy is not the right term. The most effective way to thwart an anxiety attack or a panic attack is to have a self-awareness that develops by kind of thinking about what's happening inside your mind, inside of your body, inside of your environment, as your anxiety is ramping up. Because the easiest way to change the process is to intervene in the process before your anxiety level gets so high that you can no longer manage or control it. So my suggestion would be, if you are a person who is running on the higher side of anxiety right now, write down what you notice, write down when you notice it, right? What time of day, when is it happening most often? You've probably had some experience with this, so you could be reflective in a non-anxious moment and kind of say, well, first I feel it X. Because the thing about anxiety that's a little tricky is we all experience, anxiety has lots of symptoms associated with it and signs of it, but we all experience them differently in different combinations. So it's not like a one-size-fits-all thing. So what I may experience as anxiety, if I become anxious, my first signs of anxiety are always in my belly, with the experience of butterflies in my stomach. So I can be going along doing something and my brain hasn't even registered that I'm anxious yet, but my tummy is letting me know. It's knocking on the door saying, Catherine, become aware. The other piece, so recognizing and understanding and doing something before it gets bad. And by doing something, I mean, move a muscle, change a thought, reach out and call a friend. We are in, you know, because we're in this age where everything is kind of turned upside down, we can't just go to somebody's house and you know, knock on the door and go in and get a hug and some consolation. We have to do it virtually. So think about the ways that you're reaching out. If you don't have a lot of avenues, then start with the avenues that you do have. Telephone, you know, video chat, going on to FaceTiming a friend, something like that, where you can create some connection. Because when you can connect with another person, especially somebody that you care about and trust, it will help. They can help you by their very presence, talking about nothing at all or anything at all. Being able to process your feelings can help lower your anxiety. if you find that you're continuing to experience this, though, the biggest thing that you need to do is reach out and ask for some help. Right now, most therapists that I know, we're all virtual, so we're all still here. And gone is the time where we can allow stigma to stop us from getting what we need. You know, this is a different reality today. And part of that reality is taking care of our whole being. We've had to learn really rapidly how to take care of our physical body and social distance and hand washing and all of these different things to help us protect ourselves from the virus. But learning about what our mental health is all about right now, and understanding not only the general but also the specific to ourselves, helps us to stay safe and stay healthy. It helps us to be the parent we want to be, the coach we want to be. It's the idea of, in trauma-informed care, they use an idea called universal precautions. And if you've ever been on an airplane in your life, right, the flight attendant comes on and says, first place the mask over your own nose and mouth before you help the person sitting next to you. That's the same thing here. If we are not taking care of ourselves, tuning into the things that we know, developing new skills, looking at new ways of connecting and being together so that we can feel supported and feel loved and feel heard, then we are at risk of experiencing more and more anxiety. So there's things that you can do, and then there's help that you can get. And I would hope that you really kind of reach out and take advantage of what's out there for you. And if you need resources, we have lots.
We're going to send that out to everybody so everybody has resources. There's another question I think you also just answered. Susan said, I'm severely immune compromised and have been advised to self-isolate. As the weeks go on, I feel so lonely and isolated. How can I deal with it? And it sounds like your advice to the person to avoid the anxiety attack is similar, to kind of figure this out, like what's the pattern, when are you feeling this way, and then trying to connect. I know that on the theological side, one of the things that we like to talk about in ministry has to do with an understanding of a theology of accompaniment, right, Father? That Christ's presence is always there. It is not just locked, and nowadays it better not be. But the Pope has been making a big effort to make us understand that Christ is present with us when something like this is happening. He is not away from you. He is always close. That's not going to heal a psychological or physiological illness or problem or any kind of issue that's happening. But at the same time, it can give us some kind of solace in the sense that I feel myself trying to be more present for my friends and for my loved ones because I know they need it because I need it. And so I feel like I need to be Christ for others. And I think that that's an important way of starting to work through some of this, is to kind of feel like you can be of service to others. Isn't that one of the ways that we deal with our anxieties and our isolation, is to reach out either for help if you need medical attention, if you need to talk to someone and get the care you need, but even to just establish that connection yourself by maybe reaching out to someone that needs it or might need it. We have those kind of folks in our lives that we don't always pay as much attention to as we would like. And what Jesus is trying to get us to do, and what we're called to do, is to be that for them, to be that handout and that connection. So I think we should also be mindful of that. And I don't know, Catherine, if that's I'm not sure if that's a legitimate therapeutic solution, but it's certainly a spiritual one, to be part of the help for someone else.
Can I comment before we move on? Because I think you bring up a great point, and thank you, Isabel, because every time you share, you bring up things that I want to piggyback on or have comment about, and you're bringing me lots of good ideas tonight and reminders. So I thank you. But yes, for us in our isolation, especially for those who are more immunocompromised or more at risk, we can feel really alone. And so I think you speak beautifully to the piece, the faith piece. On the practical side, you also bring up the reaching out and being of service to others in whatever way you can, as a service to self. And I think that that's really important, to hearken back to a brief experience after the Sandy Hook school shootings, of which I worked in for a number of years and my family was involved. One of the things that was most powerful about that and most solidifying, even if we couldn't be together, was acts of kindness. So our acts of kindness now look different than they did during that time in Sandy Hook, where people were physically able to come together. But sometimes reaching out when we feel bad or we feel isolated or alone, reaching out to another person in whatever way you can and providing them with connection and an ear and a giggle is a wonderful way to kind of pay it forward. It not only helps you feel better, but it helps them feel better, and then you feel more connected. For a person who might be experiencing isolation, though, if you're on this call and you're having that and you're feeling disconnected and you're not exactly sure what resources or where you can turn, shoot me an email after this or give me a call. My program assistant and coordinator, Kyle Osborne, is an amazing researcher. And in the first days and weeks of the pandemic, we've done a tremendous amount of research on different access points, whether you like art or animals or anything. You know, we've done a lot of legwork finding podcasts and virtual museum tours and Broadway HD and all sorts of different things that you can plug into when you have to stay home, when you can't be out in the world, and even support groups, you know, kind of warm support groups that are out there that people can join. It's not therapy, it's just talking it through. And so there are lots of different ways. So I would invite you to reach out to me and I will gladly impart to you everything that we know.
I want to take a brief pause. One of the things that we knew was that we possibly would go over time because this was going to be a very rich discussion. So what I want to do is give Kimmy a moment to kind of formally let whoever needs to go. And then those of us who myself and Father Anthony and Catherine are able to stay around for a few more minutes. And I know there's 2 more questions in the queue that I wanted to get to. And we will do that, but I wanted to give you guys the technical jumping off point, and Kimmy can do that, and then we'll just kind of we'll be able to continue with some conversation. Kimmy will give you some information, I guess, right? And then Father Anthony, if you could do a closing prayer for those folks, and then we'll just continue for a few more minutes. Those of you who want to stay, you're more than welcome to stay with us for a little bit longer. Kimmy?
So I just wanted to let you all know that we already have our next week's session, Q&A session together. So you'll actually be able to already go on our website and register for this. This is next Monday. And as Catherine mentioned earlier, this is going to be on recognizing grief. So this is next Monday, April 27th at 7 p.m. And as you can see, I'm being switched out with Isabel. So I will be your resident theologian, if you'll allow me the title, next week.
We've deputized her, it's okay.
So that's already up on the website. You can sign up there. I think those who are in Zoom, once you log out of Zoom, it should automatically come up as a website. We also mentioned that Father Anthony is doing some tremendous work at San Pedro Center to offer different chapel events at 3 p.m. every day, in addition to our live stream Mass. So this is just the schedule of what that looks like. These are all currently on Facebook Live. Please tune in and join in with us every day at 3 p.m. We also have a new YouTube channel as well, so we're posting some new videos on there. And then I just wanted to highlight, we're doing virtual retreats during this time, so it's just $10 to register, and you're able to spend 2 hours set aside with the Lord. And so we've got our next 2 highlighted here on April 22nd with Isabel Fernandez, yours truly, and on May 14th with Louis Cantor, which is going to be wonderful. So that's all I've got. Father Anthony, if you want to take it away with our prayer.
Okay, so I want to close with a prayer by St. John Henry Newman, a prayer for the evening. O Lord, support us all the day long of this troublous life, until the shadows lengthen and the evening comes. The busy world is hushed, and the fever of life is over, and our work is done. Then in thy mercy, grant us a safe lodging, a holy rest, and peace at the last. Amen.
Amen.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
May Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Yeah, I didn't know you could still do that virtually. You could just send it out and it works.
It works.
All right, so we do have two more questions for those of you who are hanging out with us a little bit longer. One is, they're both pretty specific, speaking to folks who are in different kinds of circumstances. The first one is how to deal with not having all the answers when others depend on you, so being in leadership, and the guilt of making difficult decisions about employees. I know my best friend's husband just had to furlough, I think it was 4 employees, which is a good bit of his staff. And he's had, it really just tore him up to do it. Everybody was nice. Everybody understood. We all know what's happening. Nobody took it personally or had a bad reaction, but he just felt the weight of it. And I know that in our schools, we have principals and, and all of us have roles to play in our businesses and in our work lives. My brother actually just told me he was having a similar kind of stress about, I've already had to let some folks go. I'm going to have to do it again. Everybody's looking at me and I don't know. I just have, everybody just has to deal with that. How do you deal with that kind of stress when you're in leadership and people depend on you, Catherine?
Wow, I wish I had a one word for that. Like, here you go, here it is. Single
You
answer.
the magic wand answer?
Yes. Well, my pen. There is no single way, and there is no easy way to deal with it. Because of the nature of what this is, and because we don't actually have all the answers and we don't know what the forecast is going to bring, living with that kind of ambiguity is really difficult. It sounds like the person who's asking the question is experiencing, that feeling of heaviness, that feeling of burdensomeness, and feeling responsible for the livelihoods of other people, and having to kind of wrestle with that. And there is no single answer, other than, I would kick it up to Father and say, help us with prayer, help us with faith. What we know from a scientific perspective is that eventually this will change again. And it will, we will get back to some semblance of something that was like it was before, but we don't even know what that will look like. But we know, I know part of the human experience is wanting to understand what that is, and wanting to have that forecast, and wanting to know already what is going to be and how it's going to look, so that we can begin to prepare and to plan. Adaptation is one of our greatest gifts, the ability to kind of change with what's happening. So, I think that again, the best answer is kicking it one. The way I see your screens, Father Anthony's one screen above me, so I would kick it up the chain.
Sending it up to you, Father.
Yeah, kick it up for faith, and then thinking about that person's self-care and what they're doing to take care of and manage their own feelings, and especially being able to have somebody to talk with about that. So there's the connector point, finding somebody, because there are lots of bosses, there are lots of business owners who are in the very same shoes. And I am quite sure that if we haven't found one, there's groups out there of people who are talking about this very issue and just processing through their feelings, because there really isn't any answer. We can't know because we don't know yet. And so getting support from people who are in a similar position is helpful.
I think you're right. Speaking with people who have that same understanding of being in that position of responsibility and leadership, But I would say a couple of things just from having worked with so many principals over the last couple of years with the Office of Schools, and then Father Anthony, I'd be interested if you could join us in here on the whole faith part of this, because I'll probably add more question than anything. We're gonna really see if you can really help us out with this, but relying on each other. But I feel like theologically, there's we don't always have a huge capacity to just accept, because we don't want to, and particularly if you're a person in leadership, that tragedy happens, right? That there are situations that we're in that are outside of our choosing, that we didn't design, that nobody's at fault. And that when you're the person in charge, you're the leader, or you're a responsible a person in the chain of command, you can't pretend that's not affecting you. You need to be very in touch with how that's affecting you, and to really deal with it honestly, and also recognize it. Unfortunately, it's a question. I know that theologically, when you look at the virtues, it's a question of humility and accepting that it's really not your responsibility, in the sense that you didn't make it happen. You have a part to play. You're doing the best you can. And sometimes we have to have some sense of accepting that normally you have a lot of ability to make a lot of things happen and a lot of things better and to make things work. We are not in that kind of time where we have the ability to fix and to make things better. And I think part of it is just recognizing our own powerlessness. And I think that's where I'll kick it up to the priest, because
well, haven't kicked it up to me, but you're very right. I have been seeing, or hearing a lot of persons who are owners of businesses who have had to furlough persons and so forth. They have to do all kinds of, whatever it is that they have to do. And they're really under stress because they don't want to disappoint their employees. But again, Isabel, where you're right, is that, I said to them, this is not your doing. You did not bring this coronavirus about. And therefore, you are responding to this like everybody else. And you're saying, this is what I need to do at this time. And so it's just to get them to keep on talking. And I say, just hand this over to God. Because I have to do the same thing. I was not ordained to say, live stream mass every day, that kind of thing. But we adapt because we're trying to do the best that we can. And so, and when I said earlier on about reconnecting with what really matters, is that yes, we reconnect with God in our faith, but we reconnect with other persons because, I know he won't mind me if I call his name, but every evening in all of this, Father Walsh and I, we just sit and we talk because, I think that we're supplying, what is needed for each other as we go through this, priest to priest.
Yeah. I think that's important, though, that what you just said, to find somebody who understands what you're going through, because it is very it is very specific. It is very difficult to be in that role, and I don't know that anybody would have the sympathy for it. Although I think right now everybody does understand, but from person in charge of stuff to person in charge of stuff, we just have to be able to give that kind of support. I don't know, Catherine, if it's psychological, but for some reason I just hear it better when it's somebody who knows what I'm doing, I'm going through, they're going through it as well. And I feel like I have somebody with me in the whole.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's easier for us to hear things when we're talking to somebody who we believe or perceive gets it. gets it, right? If you've been there, if you walked a mile, we can't ever walk a mile in another person's shoes, but we can come alongside with very close, similar experiences. And psychologically, that helps us to feel like we're really seen and really understood, like that other person really gets it. Whereas maybe our spouse might not, or a friend who does something different for a living or has a different place in the company might not really understand. We are comforted by reassurance from individuals that we feel like really, really get where we're at.
Yeah. I think that's a really great way of putting it. And just we're on our last question, folks. So this will be it for the night. Another kind of specific situation, but I think a lot of people are in it. Any guidance on raising our grandchildren who are 5 and 7 since homeschool has begun? Our ages play an important part. We're in our retirement years and running out of steam. Just one minor point, as somebody who works with the Office of Schools, we're not doing homeschooling, although they are doing they're doing school from home. At least our schools, we are making sure that we are providing as much of an experience of still working with their teachers and with their school folks, because we know it's too much for parents and grandparents in this situation to be able to do the heavy lifting of teaching kids all the things they're supposed to be doing. So first, I would just say, as somebody who works for the Office of Schools and who's been working with schools, if you're feeling overwhelmed by that in any way, please reach out to your students, their teacher, the school personnel, the principal, because we are trying our hardest to try to make sure that people feel supported in what we're trying to achieve with students through this kind of crazy homeschool distance situation. And it is hard. I am not in my retirement years and I'm running out of steam. And Catherine and I were both just talking about how we're running out of steam. It's a lot. You're definitely not alone in that. But I know that I recognize there's an additional, you were kind of through a lot of this, and it's difficult to be on so often when you're with the kids. So Catherine, did you want to give them maybe some suggestions and how they could deal with the running out of steam that's part of this, especially for folks who are in their situation?
Absolutely. I see more and more now where, folks in their retirement years are coming back and caring for young ones again. And in the best of circumstances, it's difficult not to run out of steam. And for your specific situation, I think Isabel's first suggestion is a stellar one. Reach out, and that's a great resource to get yourself some help, right? There are people there's staff involved. If you talk with them about what's going on, see what they can provide. In going back and looking at specifically what's going on at home, thinking about how the day is structured might be really helpful, where you sit down with your spouse and kind of lay out how the school day is going to go. There's blocks, and create blocks of time for schoolwork. I know, for my daughter who's at Holy Name, she has blocks of Zoom time, so where she's in class. So you would structure the learning time around those blocks, and then have distinct blocks for other activities and play. And that way you and your spouse can kind of switch off, where one person gets a mental emotional break and it kind of tags out, and the other person is with the kids, and they are, sole responsible for them for that period of time right now. The other, and then switch back and forth, so that each person, you may not be able to get that as much time together as you would like right now, but again, we're in a state of adaptation and trying to just cope with what we have. But this way, each one of you gets rest breaks throughout the day. Obviously taking good self-care, food, water, movement, all of those things, sleep, because sleep is a huge issue for people right now. So making sure that you're getting enough rest, the practical aspects. The other thing that I might also suggest, and this is a little bit controversial, so not inappropriate, but controversial.
Depending for after hours, Catherine.
Well, no, it speaks to screens. And
Mm.
people have, people have a lot of strong feeling about the use of screens with youth. Right now, I think screens are great.
They're little windows to the world, aren't they? All of a sudden.
Right? But it also, depending upon, what the gender of the kids is and what their energy level is, putting them in front of a show for 30 minutes or putting them in front of a movie for an hour and 15 minutes so that you two can step back and take a break and practice some good self-care and just rest and take care of yourselves is another great way to do that. Having virtual play dates, they're a little young for that, but that's also a possibility. So there's some ways to be creative with it. But those are some suggestions that might be helpful to be able to give you some respite in a time when we can't call in, troops from the outside to come in and take it away.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
Mm.
Father Anthony, did you want to add anything to that? Or
No, I mean, that sounds great,
sounds really good. I think the tag team, create a plan and execute the plan. We're getting a lot of gratitude in the chat, and I just want to say thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Father Anthony.
Thank you, Isabel.
Thank you,
The
Isabel.
two of you have been
Father.
stellar. Catherine, I know you're exhausted right about now, so you go take care of, do self-care.
I'm
You're
planning on it.
Next Monday, we'll be up to do the grief-specific conversation. Just to give you guys an idea, since you're our after hours crowd, we've got a couple other topics in the cooker. We've been thinking about something to do about financial stresses on families, and possibly even another one on shame. So we're thinking about those. Be thinking yourselves and make sure you have questions, or if you know folks you have concerns about from your circle, please bring their concerns, because we really want to try to reach out and provide some kind of presence and support from the church and from the retreat center and from Catholic Charities and from the school's office. We really are trying to work together to help you feel as supported as you need to be. So please, if you need us, reach out to us in school, at Catholic Charities, at San Pedro. We're all here to try to support you in what you're going through. So please use us. We also need to not be lonely. So come to us and make us earn our keep. We are very grateful to all of you. Again, thank you both. And I'm not sure how Kimmy does this, but she'll push some magical button and the whole thing will be over, I think.
Well, there you go. Thank you to both of you. This was amazing.
Thank you,
And
Catherine.
thank you too, Kimmy.
Always a pleasure, Catherine. Good.
I don't know what was going over on Facebook, but I'm sure it was a lot.
It was very active. It was wonderful. All right. Have a good night. We'll see you guys again Monday.
Okay, night
All right.
tonight.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.